Have you ever read something so deeply layered that every paragraph, it felt like the ground was shifting beneath you? That's exactly how I've been feeling as I move deeper into The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And at first, it seemed like some simple strategy clarity action book, but somewhere around chapter 6 or 7 or 8, I fell down a rabbit hole, and it was about me and my blind spots, showing me ways I could identify these blind spots. My name's Kim. I'm a classical East Asian medical provider and a Taoist practitioner. This year, we are in the year of the wood snake. And it's this incredible time of shedding skins, of revealing hidden truths about ourselves, and transforming how we relate to others. So like Darwin said, it's not going to be the strongest who survive, but the most adaptable. When it comes to relating to others and adaptability, well, conflict is the name of the game, and Sun Tzu and The Art of War offer the perfect mentor. So let's bring it into the 20th century. In chapter 8, Sun Tzu provides tools to help us identify some of our blind spots by sharing 5 behaviors that will sabotage you from the inside out, behaviors that make you lose the battle before it even begins. If you've ever walked away from a disagreement feeling small or unheard or like you betrayed yourself just to keep the peace, well, this conversation is for you. Let's look at the 5 behaviors. I'm going to connect them to classical Taoist wisdom, and then we're going to gently unpack one of them together. One behavior that might be keeping you in a loop of conflict, even when your heart is asking for peace. At the end of chapter 8, Sun Tzu lists the 5 character traits that are the cause of defeat in conflict. So the first one is recklessness, which leads to destruction. The second is cowardice, leading to capture. The third is a hasty temper, which can be provoked by insults. And the fourth is a delicacy of honor, which is going to be sensitive to shame. And the last one, the fifth, is over solicitude for the men, exposing you to worry and trouble. So why these 5 personal characteristics are a danger is because they encourage sacrificing yourself. And when I first read these, I kind of glossed over them. Yet in everything ancient literature, it all has a point. And I just didn't expect The Art of War to feel so personal, because I could actually remember moments in relationships or at work or in a conflict where I actually defaulted to one of these 5 traits, and afterwards I'd feel small or unheard, or like I'd given something of myself away. And then I started to see the precision behind the words in this book. The traits, they line up perfectly with 5 elements in classical Chinese thought. So metal, water, wood, fire, earth. And they highlight the behavior we exhibit when we're out of balance in that element. So in Taoist healing, the pathway to disease is first the spirit, then to the emotions, and then afterwards it's going to impact our thoughts, which influences our behavior. And finally, if it's still unaddressed, it's going to show up in the body. So these traits, these behaviors, they're not just personality quirks, they're signs, indicators that something deeper may be out of alignment. And in classical Taoist East Asian medicine, the goal is to assist you in getting back into balance. So to replace imbalance with balance. Each one of the 5 traits relates to an element, which relates to an organ. So the first one is recklessness, and that relates to the metal and lungs. Cowardice relates to water and the kidneys. A hasty temper relates to the liver and wood. And then we have a delicacy of honor, which relates to fire and the heart. And the last one, over solicitude, which is going to relate to the earth and spleen. This all has meaning drenched in centuries of Taoist thought. So these 5 traits, they're laid out correctly for the 5-element theory. And I want to just highlight the precision and the amount of thought that went into every word in this text. So Sun Tzu starts with the metal energy, which is the lungs. In most of the medical texts, the elements start and end with the liver, which is where you're born. The liver is where you incarnate into this life. But Sun Tzu starts with metal and the lungs bring the spirit of heaven into the body. This is the moment you begin to separate from the Tao and begin to self-identify. And this is way before you're born. In classical thought, heaven is taken into the body through the lungs. The kidney takes the spirit from the lungs and it's going to pull that energy down into our kidneys. And that's where our spirit can step through into our body and incarnate. Afterwards, we're able to be born and grow, which is represented by the wood element. And then we come to fruition in the fire element. And then earth allows us to balance and restart the process. So Sun Tzu starts with the spirit. The moment you split from the Tao, not the moment you're born or physically manifest. What that means is that conflict is more than our physical manifestation. It's connected to our most profound sense of self, spirit. And understanding your conflict is part of your most profound lessons to learn from and incorporate. So if it's such a big lesson, that means conflict is going to make you uncomfortable. It's going to force you to look at things in real time and practice new behaviors that can scare you. So let's look at one of these 5 traits, the earth element. And in Sun Tzu's words, it shows up as over solicitude. And some translators use the word over compassion. Okay, so pause, because compassion, that's usually a good thing, right? Individuals who are strong earth elements are the ones we rely on. They're the ones who are grounded, stable, they're caring. Everyone likes the earth people. But when earth is out of balance, there are really specific ways that you're going to be affected. So when this cycle starts to break down, they'll say things like earth overcomes water. So earth's compassion blocks our ability to adapt to the situation. And if we can't adapt, we're going to get stuck in ineffective behaviors. And those behaviors, because they fail, allow anxiety and fear to grow. We start overthinking the thing and we can become indecisive. Another way earth can overwhelm and exhaust metal. So metal is where we get our discipline, and we might be reluctant to enforce discipline on ourselves and others, which can result in chaos. And it can show up as the inability to complete things or some perceived lack of structure in our life. So the lesson is, the general, you must balance earth's kindness with metal's severity. You know, that enforcing discipline, and water's fluidity, its ability to adapt. Otherwise, that nurturing becomes self-sacrifice, care becomes worry and anxiety, and boundaries become overprotection or micromanagement. Now, Sun Tzu is warning about loving the troops too much, right? That actually speaks directly to what a lot of us face in our closest relationships, like people pleasing. Saying yes when you want to say no, right? Avoiding the hard conversations to keep the peace, even when it chips away at your self-worth. Or what about rescue mentality, where you're constantly trying to save others from the consequences of their choices, which quietly enables dysfunction and codependence? Or what about emotional burnout, where you're giving more than you receive until there's nothing left to give? Well, here's a modern example. How about tolerating disrespect in a relationship because you don't want to rock the boat? So you're going to avoid the conflict, thinking you're keeping harmony, or because you're afraid of the backlash. Yet over time, resentment builds, right? The emotional connection breaks down, trust weakens, and you start to feel sacrifice and you start having stomach problems. And then maybe you start having headaches. So just like the general who spares the troops hardship but ends up losing the war, compassion without boundaries doesn't lead to peace. It leads to collapse. And in relationships, it leads to your collapse. You know, Sun Tzu knew he wasn't talking about war. He was talking about human nature, about the ways we abandon ourselves trying to hold everything together. So take a moment to ask yourself gently, where do I care too much? Where am I sacrificing clarity for harmony? Or where have I confused compassion with self-abandonment? These are questions that don't just help you understand a conflict, they help you come back to your center. Okay, if any of this resonated, if you saw yourself in the earth element, in that overcare, the blurred boundaries, the quiet worry beneath your compassion, you can get a copy of my 5 ways overcompassion makes us lose ourselves to see how this trait impacts your life. And you can get that by clicking on the link below, or there might be a link up here in the video description. Now, I want you to leave you with something gentle. I want to leave you with a practice, because Taoist healing isn't about judging ourselves or fixing things overnight. It's about restoring the flow. So returning to your center and making space for your spirit to breathe again. And if you want to get into a deeper practice, reach out and schedule a one-on-one with me. Again, there should be a link below or hopefully in the corner of the video. But in the meantime, here's something you can try this week to nourish your earth element and to help reconnect with that inner boundary keeper. So first, find a quiet spot, and preferably close to actual earth, like a patch of grass or sitting next to a plant, or even just like sitting on the floor with your spine supported. And then place one hand on your belly just below your navel, because this is your lower dantian, and that's your energetic center. Then take slow, deep breaths, letting your belly rise and fall. And with each inhale, feel your body receiving support. With each exhale, imagine releasing worry and tension or overcarrying or anything that's weighing you down. And then ask yourself gently, where in my life do I need stronger boundaries to feel safe? Where can I trust that care doesn't mean control? And finally, just listen, not for an answer, but for a feeling. That subtle shift, and that's your earth element beginning to ground again. You are not here to hold the entire world. You're here to belong in it. And the more you return to your own center, the more you're clearly going to know when to say yes, when to say no, and when compassion needs a little bit of courage behind it. Okay, until next time, I'll catch you on the other side.